Okay, let's see if this works a little bit better. This is just a continuation of the live. It froze. I don't know what the heck. My internet's been being really weird. Hopefully you guys see this. Sometimes I'm like, technology is one of those things. It's just like a love-hate. I hope you guys can see this. I'm going to minutes just so you guys see that I've gone live again. Sorry, guys. It just happens. So if I didn't get to your question yet, just ask it again, please. And we'll just keep continuing on. Oh, it's kind of freezing again. Ah! It's really angering. It's very angering. It's just like, if you guys can't hear me, just like comment that you can't hear me. But if not, or if you can hear me just fine, just ask your questions. I know Victoria said it's kind of freezing again. I am so sorry. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it other than just keep going. Let's wait for everybody to join. Hi, why do PUFAs cause freckles? Can we reverse them? So it's to say that PUFAs cause freckles, I think is a little bit too simplified. I think for some people, they can be a contributing factor in like freckling and moles and things like that. Are they the only factor? I don't think so. I think there's a lot more like oxidation involved. I know there are a few people that have told me that they've used like vitamin E to get rid of their like melasma and stuff like that. But I'm not sure about freckles. I think there's more to freckles. And I think also freckles can be genetic. So if I would say if we're getting like tons and tons in the sun, we burn really easily, there's probably a connection there. But if it's like genetic for us or there's other factors like it's one of those things where we shouldn't obsess just about the PUFAs. There are more factors, but can we reverse them? That is the question, right? There are some people that have said like they're not burning as easily and stuff like that, but then some people may not experience that. So I think it just depends on the person. Hey, Jess, just wanted to say thank you for all this knowledge you provide for free. I appreciate you guys being thankful. For the first 7 years, I'm ovulating. I have a normal cycle. My hair loss stopped and just got my blood work done. Awesome. And my testosterone is completely back to normal. LH-FSH is also finally where it should be. I still can't believe it. Only my LDL cholesterol is too high, probably thyroid related, right? Question mark. If you have an HTMA, do you think that can be sufficient for determining how hormones are doing so you can work on them? Or do you think a Dutch test is needed? So with cholesterol, it's one of those things where obviously there are a lot of conflicting views on cholesterol, but I do think it has, it's metabolic related as well as like we need sunlight and vitamin A or retinol to convert cholesterol into hormones. And so if it's not thyroid related, it's usually vitamin A related. And that's where we really need to focus it, especially if we're getting plenty of sunlight. Cholesterol is one of those things where, if you're on the side of the spectrum that believes that it's protective, it's one of those things where you're not going to view it the same as if you think it's dangerous, which, I think it's important to do your own research and kind of figure it out, what you believe. How important is it to test if you have an HTMA, do you think it's sufficient for determining how hormones are doing? So you can work on them, or do you think a Dutch test is needed? Well, an HTMA is not going to tell you where your hormones are at. It can give you a great insight into like how much stress we've been under for the past couple of months, and kind of like how our thyroid is doing a little bit, and a small indicator. But it's not going to tell us like exact information. So if we really want to know where our hormones are at and like see a visible change in them, it might be a good idea to get a Dutch test. Is it necessary? But no. Okay. I'm glad that I'm back because I was super worried for a second. Thoughts on exchanging the carrot salad with a couple of tablespoons of horseradish to switch things up? Like, are you talking about like shredded horseradish? I think you would probably like die, or at least like very much regret your decision. I think that horseradish should always be mixed with something like sour cream or something along those lines. It is very spicy and it is very potent. It does not take the place of like a carrot. It can be an amazing, amazing tool, but it's by no means should be eaten raw or just like straight, unless you have done that before and you like know how you do with that. What's your take on beans and lentils? I think that they should be treated as a carbohydrate and they should be properly prepared, which means soaked and either cooked for a very long time or pressure cooked. And still, if you're still struggling and you have lots of hormonal issues, you might do better without them. It's kind of like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. It's same. Like, I don't think we should just restrict just to restrict or cut something out of our diet just for the sake of cutting it out. But if we're continuing to eat something on a regular basis and we're not seeing improvements in our health, it could possibly be a contributing factor. So that's kind of my take, is they really do need to be properly prepared. And I don't think that they're like a protein by any means. Hi, Jess. What are your thoughts on mold testing and when should it be done? I think mold can be a very huge stressor for a lot of people. I also think people get like super paranoid about it. So I think there's like a fine balance. With mold, I think it should be tested if you are like struggling and nothing you're doing is working. So or you have like a history of things, mold or water damage or things like that. But Harlow Wellness. I honestly don't know if it's a he or she. Like I don't want to be like, I think it's a, I was going to say like, he really breaks down education very, very well. But it's just an educational page. And I know that the person that runs the page does consultations about mold, but there's a lot of education on the page. So highly recommend checking it out. And like very simple things like where mold hides, like things like in drains and things like that. But lots of education on like ERMI testing and stuff like that. But I think the mold kind of climate can get very, very, like it can get very, very, I want to say stressful almost. Like people just obsess about mold, and then, it's one of those things where you just don't know, like you're just so consumed with it and so stressed and so hyper focused on it that like nothing else matters. And I think it's important to like look at everything in balance. What are your thoughts on wearing magnets? I don't have any thoughts on it. Like, I'm really not sure. Doing all the things, as you know, acne on face cleared and periods are more regular, but I can't seem to clear acne on my back. Wondering if there's an underlying parasite issue. I think that a lot of times back acne, or we can say backne, has a gut component to it for sure. Figuring out what that gut component is can sometimes be a little bit like difficult. So for some people, like parasites, bacteria, fungus, those are all factors in the gut. And then, but at the same time, sometimes those can all be happening at once. So chasing one thing might not be the right thing to do. But yeah, if it's gut related or you feel like the gut is impacting it, it totally could be a parasite issue. Can progesterone oil cause weight gain? For some people, it can increase their, I don't want to say it like causes weight gain, but what is it doing in the body? Like, is it increasing their stress? So therefore, like the cortisol is increasing weight gain. Is it is it a metabolic issue that maybe it's driving? In the case of like iron, sometimes it can increase iron movement from the tissues, which of course has an impact on the metabolism. So those are all factors that I think are important to look at. But at the end of the day, like, does progesterone directly cause weight gain? Not for a lot of people, but if it does for you, that doesn't mean like your experience isn't valid. If you don't like bone broth, would collagen and jellos replicate the benefits? Yeah, I mean, yeah, they have gelatin, collagen. If you respond well to those things, then yeah, I mean, it can replicate a lot of the benefits. To say it like replicates something perfectly, no, because it's not bone broth, but it has the glycine. Any thoughts on the cell core products? Was researching their parasite full moon cleanse, wondering if the carrot salad can do the same thing. I saw cell core products and I was curious about them. I can't remember who was talking about them. I'm not like super familiar with them. I personally prefer tinctures whenever possible. I'm wondering if BioRay has a good one. I don't know. I just find that tinctures tend to work a little bit better, but for some people they prefer capsules. I think it's really like personal preference, but I don't have any experience with cell core, so I can't tell you like what I think about it. I'm not familiar with the ingredients. If you have how do you know if you just need more time or if something isn't working? Been doing pro-metabolic for 6 months, but came in thrashed. I guess like looking at everything and sometimes even just taking like 30 minutes to sit down and drop a timeline can be very helpful. And this is where tracking data can be helpful. Like if you're someone that has health short-term memory loss, which is like my term for you always just like feel the worst now and you don't ever remember like, oh wait, like when I came into it, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't feeling good at all, there was nothing going right for me, and then now I'm like feeling a lot better. Some people just like have a really hard time remembering how bad they were before. So sometimes it can be nice to just sit down and like literally draw a timeline of your whole story, what you remember from before, what you like, how you're feeling now, and put everything in perspective for yourself. But yeah, like, how do you know if it's working? Like, what do you mean by working? There's no gauge for like if something's working or not. It's like we should be feeling better than we were before in a lot of ways. And if we're not, then we may need to experiment around with some stuff. But like to say like, pro-metabolic is working or not. Well, what are you considering pro-metabolic? There are so many small little caveats to health. And so if you really aren't feeling better, maybe like reconsider like how are your foundations, like sleep, movement, light, making sure you're balancing your blood sugar. Are you eating enough calories? Are you eating enough protein? Those are all factors that like we should like review. How important is it to test your pulse in the morning with your waking temp? Mine is always very low, but then rises to ideal range after food. It's important to test it to see, like, obviously you're seeing that your metabolism is like picking up once you eat. So like that's very clear. So it's nice to have that data, if we don't have that data, we have no clue how our meal's affecting our pulse. Do you have to do it? No. But it's nice to have that data. Hi, Jess. Thanks for being here. Of course, Courtney. Any particular brands of MCT oil you like? Honestly, I just pick up a big one at Costco. I have been doing that lately. It's just like I can't beat the cost. But no, there's no like specific brand that I'm just like obsessed with or prefer. I just look for a good price. I see one that says, and try to follow. Oh, I got lost again. What's new? But the PUFAs we had as kids with our tissues now, since they only last around 3.25 years, right? So unless you consumed a lot of PUFA in the last 3.25 years, your tissue shouldn't be saturated. Well, that has a lot to do with how much vitamin E you've been consuming, how much saturated fats in comparison. Like if you're still eating lots of MUFAs, I'll just use an example. So I've had a client in the past who grew up eating lots of PUFAs, then went paleo. And so yes, a majority of their fats were not polyunsaturated in the sense of like they weren't eating tons of vegetable oils, but they were eating tons of nuts and seeds, and they were cooking majority with avocado oil. They were cooking with coconut oil. They were eating lots of like coconut oil and avocado oil based things, olive oil, and they weren't actually getting a lot of saturated fat in their diet from like cream, butter. Maybe they were getting like egg yolks and maybe a little bit of organ meat. But in reality, a lot of people are not getting the right nutrients they need to move the polyunsaturated fats out of their tissues. So yeah, like in theory, if you have been eating a lot of polyunsaturated fats in the past couple of years and you've been eating plenty of the nutrients that you need to, get that movement going? Of course. But to say that, it takes like a good amount of times to change the fatty acid composition of our body once we stop consuming PUFAs. So at what point did we stop consuming a bunch of concentrated refined vegetable oils? That's really when. It's not like our fatty acid profile is constantly turning. We can have PUFAs stuck in our tissues that we've had there for a very long time that haven't moved. I hope that makes sense. If you truly have low estrogen, not just low on a test behind the tissues, what would you do to support estrogen production? What would be some of the signs of truly low estrogen? At this point, I would get a test, because if you truly have low estrogen, which is rarely the case if we're still cycling women, if we're cycling. Now, of course, excludes like hypothalamic amenorrhea and menopause, but for truly cycling women, it's just so rare. I'm not saying it's impossible. Similar to low testosterone, I think that stress can really wreak havoc. But a lot of times, stress is going to drive, DHEA up, which is then, obviously a precursor to estrogen, or we're going to see estrogen in the tissues increase. So, if you truly have low estrogen, it's way more about lowering stress, because, if we're not converting cholesterol into hormones, we got some probs. We got to make sure we're nourishing, eating plenty of calories, getting plenty of fats from the right sources, true fats, not oils, and getting plenty of vitamin A, and plenty of sunlight to convert that cholesterol into hormones. And we got to really be working to reduce stress, making sure our minerals are good, all of that. When we have low hormones, it means we're in a more depleted state than when we have like excess hormones. That's how far we've gotten into this place where our body's depleted. But yeah, I would support the body by giving it the precursors, the nutrients, the raw materials, and the environment it needs to make hormones, because hormones are just cellular messengers. What would be some signs of truly low estrogen? I think like going by signs is not a great idea. I mean, yeah, there's like some people will say low libido, or like a lot of vaginal dryness, or there's like a long list of stuff. But interestingly enough, a lot of it coincides with signs of high estrogen and low progesterone. So for me, I'm always worried, and I'm always keeping it in the back of my mind. Does somebody have truly low estrogen, or is it not in the blood? And it's just important to look at it in context of those factors. It's a lot of people will fight to the death and tell me that estrogen cannot store up in the tissues, iron cannot store up in the tissues, like that's impossible. And I'm like, okay, like whatever, because it is possible. I've seen it so many times. Thanks for all the answers. Not sure if you got the questions from before. I'm new to this and improved my life. Don't have any symptoms in general, but I do have a hard time relaxing sometimes when I feel tired. I didn't get your previous question. So if I didn't get to your question in the last live, please ask it again. And I think that, sometimes we do have a hard time relaxing when we're tired. It can definitely be, that's the toll stress can take on us. Spotting for over 2 months since I started eating metabolic. From your experience, could I just be adjusting from a regular period, or does this sound more like estrogen, PCOS, cysts, fibroids? I couldn't tell you. I mean, spotting can be a factor in all of those things. Of course, doesn't mean we have those things. No. But I would be looking at, like, are you just spotting throughout the whole cycle? Are you spotting around ovulation? Some people say that spotting like around the middle of the cycle can be a sign of estrogen dominance, or even some people will say it's a sign of thyroid issues. I know for a lot of people who have estrogen dominance, they'll sometimes have very long periods where they won't stop bleeding, or mid-cycle spotting. So that's something that would be maybe worth exploring. But it can mean a lot of things. Or for some people, it can be normal. So it's a good idea to just pay attention and get it checked out if we need to. How often do you think running a Dutch test is needed, especially if we're still having symptoms? I personally think, like, I just think whenever you want. I think hormones take a really long time to change. And when you're collecting hormonal data, especially like the Dutch test, it's really helpful to see where things are. But it's one of those things where when you're running a test, it's kind of like, what are you going to do with the test? Because if you're just going to like run it for data, great. Like that's awesome. I sometimes like to just assess my progress as I go along. But if you do them too close together, sometimes you get discouraged or you're like, oh no, I need to change everything in my life. And it's kind of like, well, sometimes we just need to like give it some time. So don't let it throw you into a tailspin of like, oh no, like what I'm doing is not working. And like, you kind of want to use it as data like to reflect what you like, to confirm what you're already experiencing on a daily basis, rather than to just like throw your life into a tailspin of like, oh no, like I need to change all these things again. Sometimes it's just like consistency. The goal is to see ourselves moving in the right direction. But personally, like I only run one on myself like maybe every 2 years. If I'm like, I wonder what's going on with me, I'll do it. But I'm like, I know that there's not a lot that I get from the Dutch test that's like applicable in the sense of, oh no, I need to like take DIM and this and that and this and that. I don't treat the Dutch test like that. I mean, maybe doctors do, but I personally just use it as like data to collect on myself, or it's helpful for other people or clients. But by no means is it like 100% necessary to do all the time. Some people like to run them very often though. And try to fall asleep. It's super hard. Please recommend a supplement. I can't recommend a supplement for sleep. Sometimes we just need to like calm our mind and relax. And if we're really tired and stressed, you know, sometimes we can our really busy and stressful day into like a good sleep at night. We need like a period of like winding down for the night. So I think it's important to make sure we're eating enough throughout the day, balancing and taking some time to like rest and just chill out before we go to bed. If a grain flour food is enriched fortified, is it required to be on a bowl? I think most of the time, yes. Like it usually will say like fortified flour. But I need to look into that a little bit more. I assumed yes, but then I'm like, wait, I don't know. I had an iron infusion a few months ago and have now started to take Shilajit, but I've heard Shilajit can increase iron. Does Shilajit increase iron in the body or help detox excess iron? Well, this is why like some people that are just misinformed talk about things in such a weird way. So it's similar. Iron is similar to estrogen in the sense of like it can get stuck in the tissues if there's not enough of the right nutrients to allow our body to use it properly. So our body will push it into the tissues in order to like keep it away from pathogens. And so what can happen is as we implement the nutrients we need to move iron from storage into the bloodstream, that can look like an increase of iron. Our body is now moving it and mobilizing it. And as long as we have the nutrients to deal with it, it's a good thing. But, you know, I think that Shilajit really does help move iron, at least from my experience using it. But there's no like definitive evidence or research. What do you think of herring and hot dogs? I don't know if you like them. Like, I would be careful about the hot dogs. Like, what, you know, there are a lot of different types of hot dogs. If they're like uncured and organic and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure like they can be probably an easy thing for a once in a while meal. I wouldn't probably rely on hot dogs as like a staple in my life. And then herring, like, honestly, I'm not that familiar. I know it's a fish. I think it's a fatty fish, but honestly, like, if you like it, you have it like local to you, you enjoy it, it's probably great. Thoughts on Tulsi Holy Basil? I personally like it if you do well with it. I think that with all adaptogens, it's one of those things like if you do great with it, awesome. If you don't, then like there's no reason to be taking it. Adaptogens are very like personal. And what do you think of Full Circle's prenatal for girls that want to become pregnant soon? I highly recommend checking out Loren at Functional Nutrition and watching like her episodes on breaking down prenatal. Very, very fascinating. Hi, Jess. I've had insomnia for 10 plus years. Came off Klonopin a month ago after 2 years high dose, and it's worse. Been pro-metabolic 2 months and no better. I've tried everything and feel it's hindering healing. Any advice? A lot of times how we're sleeping, it has everything to do with what's going on during the day. So balancing blood sugar, making sure we're eating enough calories is absolutely essential. Is that everything? Absolutely not. There are other factors involved like minerals, magnesium, neurotransmitters. And if we can't relax at night, first of all, we have to break down our sleep problems. Are we having a hard time falling asleep, or are we having a hard time staying asleep? If we're having a hard time staying asleep and we're urinating a lot, it's probably an adrenaline response. And so we need to get to the bottom of why that's happening. Is it from blood sugar? Is it from a magnesium deficiency, which like often can drive it? A lot of times it's driven by, in part, mineral imbalances. There can be other factors as well that need to be explored, like is there possible like emotional trauma, emotional stuff going on? Do we need to is there like EMF issues? Like there are a lot of factors that we need to consider, like in our environment. What are we wearing? Are we getting too hot? Are we, sleeping in synthetic stuff, like on synthetic sheets? Those are all factors that we need to consider. But oftentimes how we sleep at night is really determined by what's going on during the day. But to expect us to like just go from like relying on a medication to sleep to not and just be like great, I feel like that's like kind of unrealistic. It's not it. Sleep issues can sometimes be very complicated and take some time, for sure. And don't be hard on yourself if you need something a little bit more powerful. I think sometimes we like just try to go from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, and we need to be a little bit more careful about it. Also, is any brand service probiotic okay? No. Like, I don't trust all brands of anything. I personally am very careful about probiotics just because a lot of them are formulated very poorly. Hi, Jess. What do you think about sauna bubbles? I read they are high on EMFs. Is that true? Do you like them? Interesting. I never thought about the EMF perspective. I was thinking about getting one because I love the sauna, and our gyms have been closed for obviously a very long time. And I miss the sauna. It was a dry sauna, and I was thinking about getting one, but I didn't think about the EMF perspective. Honestly, I need to look more into that. I'm not sure, but I love to sweat. It feels really great. My heart rate is consistently high, like in the 90s. What does that indicate? I'm not very active and live a mainly stress-free life. I can't say like what it indicates or not. I mean, in some cases, it can be a sign of like a little bit, like just an elevated stress hormones. It's not necessarily about external stress. It can be about internal stress too, like just not balancing our blood sugar and things like that. But I would be looking at it in context with everything else. Like if we're feeling really great and our temperatures are really great, then maybe we're good. But that's like in the 90s can be pretty high for a lot of people. So many questions. Can you recommend a clean PUFA-free lip balm moisturizer? There's a lot. Like I just look for ones that don't have the like PUFA oils. I like to use Badger Balm. I think that's cocoa butter based. Fatco is like a tallow based one. Fancy Farms, I just learned about them, has a tallow based one. Forever Healthy Hair has one called, I think, Plump. I really like that one. There's a lot. You're just looking for ones that don't have PUFA oils in them. And is refined coconut oil okay if it's 100% pure? Yes, like I got so many questions about coconut oil yesterday, and I was like, coconut oil says low PUFA on there after yesterday's post. Yes, coconut oil is saturated fat for the most part. The skin on my thighs and upper arms have this purple tinge that turns white when I poke it. Could this be poor circulation? What might help this? Is it inflammation? Is it poor circulation? I don't know. What is it? I would be looking for indicators of like of all those things. But yeah, I don't know what it is. I would be kind of exploring if there's any patterns and things like that. Can aged liver spots be reduced or eliminated with diet change or being fully nourished? some people have said like, so melasma is a similar issue. It oftentimes like shows up in pregnancy when like estrogen is high, or after like birth control or while using birth control. But there's been a lot of women who have reported to me that or I shouldn't say a lot, but I should say quite a few that have reported to me that like using vitamin E and making sure they're like switching their fats out has greatly improved their melasma. And then age spots as well, like on their hands or things like that. But I haven't particularly, at least from my knowledge, had anyone say like, oh my gosh, my age spots have been greatly reduced. But I don't see like why not. Jess, you're the shit. Thanks so much for taking the time out to help folks for free on these videos. Much appreciated. Of course. Since starting eating for metabolism 3 months ago, I have bad shoulder acne, which I have never had in my life before. What could this be a sign of? Estrogen and iron moving? It can be. It can also be a sign of just like gut dysfunction. So how's your gut doing? Liver, sometimes the liver needs to be supported. So 3 months is kind of a short time. I know you guys like hate to hear this, especially when you're like, I'm 2 months in, or I'm 3 months in, or I'm 1 month in. And it's kind of like, you've just begun. And so think about it in the terms of like 12 weeks compared to like whatever you were doing before. How long did you spend doing that? So it can just take some time for the body to just balance out. But if it just keeps getting worse, then we do need to like really hyper support the gut and the liver. And I get a lot of questions like from people that say like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling with all these issues. But then in the same breath, they're like, oh, can I just eat a carrot and not do the raw carrot salad? It's so hard for me to do the raw carrot salad. And I'm not saying that this is you. I'm just kind of giving like an example. And I'm like, yeah, you can totally eat a raw carrot, but the raw carrot salad particularly works. So if you're struggling with issues, but in the same breath, you're like trying to cut corners, you probably won't see, you might see issues that you're like wondering, like, why are they popping up? And there's a particular reason why I tell people to do something a specific way. I'm very particular with what I teach you guys. I believe words matter, delivery matters. I try to simplify as much as possible. So I always try to get rid of things. And so when it comes to like what I suggest or I talk about, I do it for a very specific reason. It's not because I'm trying to overwhelm you and give you all these things. There's a reason why I talk about what I talk about in the way that I talk about it. So all that to say is it's probably just a time thing, but definitely the liver always needs to be supported when we're struggling with like acne. I've had stiff and weak muscles, taking different forms of magnesium, vitamin K, and lots of dairy for calcium, but it actually got a little worse since taking some of the magnesium. Any ideas? Sometimes calcium can move. I'm not saying that's like in your case. In some of the trainings that I've taken, some people have told me that, or my teachers have told me that you can sometimes feel calcium moving. I've personally never experienced that, so I'd be curious to hear if anyone has experienced calcium moving because it's like a sharp mineral. But yeah, like potassium can play a big role in muscles as well. So this is why like people that have low potassium get like weird muscle twitches. That can be a factor as well. So don't overlook like the importance of sodium and potassium as well. Some people like really hyper focus on magnesium, and then what happens is it pushes their potassium levels down, and they're like, oh my gosh, I have low potassium. What does it mean if your face gets a bit puffy after eating? I'm really not sure. I mean, some things that come to mind may be like inflammation, gut issues, water retention. But I personally think like over the course of the day, we oftentimes do get like a little bit more puffy. Like we wake up with a flatter stomach, a little less of a puffy face. And then over the course of the day, like it seems like, at least for me, I retain a little bit of water over the course of the day. So but yeah, I'm not sure what that means. Considering having an HMA done, just unsure how to go about it as my local physician doesn't offer it. Recommendations? I know you can order it on this website called Even Better. I think it's called Even Better Health Now or something like that. I know it's on like the RCP or root cause protocol as a suggestion. protocol could help track down unexplained bloating. Sometimes I'll eat a food and I'm fine, and other times I'll eat the same exact food and I look like I'm about to give birth. I think so. I think that I'm not going to say like, yes, my gut protocol could help track unexplained bloating. But what I will say is I'm going to educate you guys on like patterns. So looking at patterns, like you always want to look at everything in context of hormones as well, and the rhythm over the course of the day. So, you know, at different times of the month, our digestive tract is working differently. There are also a lot of factors that affect gut health, which is going to be like minerals and things like that. And then don't forget that it might not be about the food you ate right now. Remember, when food goes down our throat and into our stomach, that's just there. But what about the stuff beneath it getting pushed? That's stuff sometimes that we're reacting to, and we're not acknowledging that there are our last couple of meals are still moving through our digestive tract. And so that's something I want to bring to your guys' attention is like, if you're getting bloated lower in your digestive tract, what did you eat a meal ago or 2 meals ago? That could be a factor as well. Tips for keratosis pilaris. Lowering inflammation in the body for sure. So yeah, like getting inflammation down, working on gut health, getting, you know, really working on those fat soluble vitamins, specifically like retinol, food sources. I personally have found a lot of success because I used to have it really bad. I don't have it as bad anymore. I mean, there are some times when it does like kind of like pick up, but I've found like a traditional Korean exfoliating glove or towel, whatever you want to call it. You can buy them on Amazon. After like a really hot shower that helps soften the skin, I will rub that first layer of skin off and then do either like an aspirin spray or aspirin paste, just something that has some aspirin in it or salicylic acid. Really helps with the appearance, at least of mine. That's not like a recommendation. I feel like everyone's different, but that's what has really helped with mine. And then over time, it's just gotten better as I've gotten like my fat soluble vitamins up and stopped eating so much stuff that irritated my gut. A raw carrot salad, like I cannot miss that thing. If I miss it, my skin will act up. And yeah, when estrogen is at its highest, like mine definitely looks a lot worse. Are the percentages on chronometer accurate? If you're talking about like percentages, like micronutrients, everyone has different, like, I think it's chronometers, percentages are like based on the recommended daily allowance, the RDA, but you can always go in and like change them if you have a goal to get more of something. But I don't know, like if you're talking about macronutrients, like no, we need to go stop those ourselves. Do you have an idea why plant-based diets have cured the C word and other diseases? That seems to be the only argument they have. Well, I mean, I guess we could say that for any diets, right? There are a lot of people who have different diets that say the same thing. It just depends on like how submerged you are in something. But if you notice, most diets that remove refined grain products that are fortified with iron and processed food with polyunsaturated fats tend to do people better than diets full of that crap. So I would say that that's probably the biggest the biggest thing that's going to make the most impact on our health. I recently heard that MCT oil is used for high heat. Didn't realize that. Do you know if that's accurate? Honestly, I'm not sure. I use it for pretty high heat and never have a problem, but maybe I should check in on that. But yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like that's like a weird thing because I feel like caprylic acid's pretty stable, but I'll check on that. I was recommended Tricatu powder as a digestive aid. I've never heard of it. It contains ginger, black pepper, and something called long pepper. Do you have any experience with this product? No. It sounds like it would be like, at least like something like that would really irritate my digestive tract. I mean, I like ginger, but black pepper really bothers me personally. I'm wondering if it's similar to like Triphala, which I really like Triphala powder. I think it's like much more gentle. I think that Triphala, it's really interesting because in Ayurvedic medicine, they talk about this stuff called, I think it's called Agna or something, which is like stagnation in the body or like toxins in the body. It's interesting like how there's a lot of parallels between what they talk about and endotoxin, and they use triphala powder to balance that out. It's like kind of like a generalized recommendation in a lot of like Ayurvedic circles, and I like think that that product is so awesome. Like I love it for binding to endotoxin, and it works for me like in conjunction with the raw carrot salad. I think it like works really, really well. Could estrogen mobilization be harmful while breastfeeding? That's a good question. And I think if we're not forcing it and the body's doing what it needs to be doing, I think the body's really wise. But if we're pushing stuff, like if we're trying to push estrogen out of the body and do all these detoxification methods, like I do not think that's a good idea while breastfeeding or pregnant. Like I always recommend against any like type of like detox or pushing anything. Just focus on nourishing and let the body do its own thing. The body constantly detoxifies in the sense of like you cannot stop the body from detoxifying. It's doing it all the time. But trying to push it, that's another story. How to know if you have fungus or parasite, SIBO, candida? Well, the best way to do it is to test, but not all tests are like conclusive in the sense of like there's no perfect gut test that tests for everything. But sometimes people can go by symptoms because their symptoms are pretty clear. But for the most part, like people who have been on antibiotics, they often have fungus just because they're wiping out bacteria without wiping out fungus. If they have like tons of digestive symptoms or like IBS, oftentimes there's, bacteria involved, SIBO involved, those types of things. But yeah, it's some people are very clear about their symptoms, and so they can go by symptoms, but a majority of people like to do like GI maps or other gut testing to figure it out. But a lot of us, if we have digestive issues or metabolic issues or liver issues or things like that, or hormone issues or acne, stuff like that, we can assume that there's something going on in our gut. Am I missing anything if I don't have oysters or liver in my diet? Yeah, there's a lot of nutrients in those foods, which is why I bring them up a lot. For oil pulling, I don't love the taste of coconut oil. Any other options? Like refined coconut oil can be good because it doesn't have the coconut taste. Or I'm trying to think of what else. Like, I mean, traditionally in Ayurveda, like they use sesame oil, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I prefer coconut oil, but I like the antibacterial component of coconut oil, which is why I use it. I just purchased refined coconut oil. Even Trader Joe's has these like little like small coconut oil packets, like little packets, and I will just like sometimes keep those in the bathroom and just use like half of them, and those ones don't taste like coconut. What do you think of Adam Bergstrom's theory of solar timing? I was thinking of getting his book because it's so interesting. He's a delightfully odd man. I haven't like looked too much into the whole solar timing theory. I know he like is very eccentric a little bit and like kind of odd. So sometimes those types of people, because my brain thinks a very specific way, sometimes people just like really overwhelm me and stress me out because I have to think of things like in a methodic manner. And when it's like all this like theory and like all these different things they do in a day, I'm just like, I don't know if my brain can wrap around it. So honestly, I'm not sure what I think of it. I need to look a little bit more into it and listen to more of his views on it. And the recommended adrenal cocktail and detox lemonade are for people with specific issues or good for everyone. Again, like it just depends on what we're trying to achieve. I mean, adrenal cocktail is supportive with like minerals, and the detox lemonade helps support the liver. They're fairly gentle supports, and I use them pretty regularly. Do you gua sha? If yes, does the brand matter? I don't gua sha. I scrape my body, but not my face. I've been looking into getting like a gua sha tool, but I don't really know what brand to buy, and I don't even know if it matters. So I have the same question as you. My friend has an emotional breakdown during her period every month. Is there something that could help her with her mood? Would limiting PUFAs make a difference? She eats a lot of nuts and seeds. Probably. A lot of people that have breakdowns are not eating enough. They're like, I hear this, I've heard this so many times, like, I'm just not hungry during my period. And they're like, I just feel like crap during my period. And I'm like, not hungry because your stress hormones are super high, and then you're not eating, and so therefore you feel like crap. So balancing your blood sugar is probably the best thing you could do while you're bleeding. I do not recommend going more than 3 hours while we're bleeding without eating, especially because like if our adrenaline is high or stress hormones are high, it's going to be heightened during that time. So that's usually the biggest factor. Would you recommend sulfur taken internally for fungal skin issue and are used as soap? Is MSM correct type of sulfur? Better to leave skin without creams and oils, shea butter, coconut oil? I think it just depends. There are lots of types of fungus in the body. Some funguses like love to thrive on oil, and so therefore if you find that your fungus is getting worse after you put like something oily or buttery on, it's probably not a good idea. But that depends on the person. Sulfur used internally, I think it should be like MSM is a synthetic like precursor to sulfur, so it's not actual sulfur. And then like taking too much sulfur inside the body can be problematic as well. So I would just be careful how you go about it. For some people, it works great. Like I've heard plenty of people that are like, oh my gosh, MSM is so awesome. But I personally don't have a lot of experience with it, nor do I see the value in it. I think there are a lot of other things that are more important. I think there are a lot better ways to go about getting rid of fungus. And it usually has to do with like antifungal herbs and getting the copper to iron ratio figured out, getting gut transit time up, because the slower our transit time, the more bacteria is going to grow. My husband has been dealing with 2 weeks of nausea and some diarrhea. It came out of nowhere with no other symptoms. Do you think this could be food poisoning? Any recs for getting back on track after? I'm not sure what it could be. I'm not a doctor, so that's something you would maybe want to get checked out or do your own research on. But when it comes to just digestion, I think like our body kind of guides us, at least for me. Like when I've had issues like that, I just kind of let my body guide me into what sounds good and those types of things. But I would obviously go slow. My mom is having a knee reconstruction on Monday. Any recommendation for recovery? I think like for people who are trying to support recovery, eating as much nutrient dense foods as possible is a good idea. Making sure we're doing like, bone broth, like broths, meats, fats, like those are all really, really nutrient dense foods. So that's like, I think that's the best thing is just making sure we're nourishing properly. Lately, I've been researching bioresonance testing and wondering if there is any merit to investing in the homeopathic tinctures provided by a practitioner. Honestly, I've had quite a few clients who have gotten bioresonance testing, and just with anything like similar to muscle testing, I have a similar experience. Just I've had a lot of clients that have done it in the past, and by no means do I'm neutral on the topic. I think there's a lot of people that find a lot of help with certain things and they really like them. And then some people have to just go through it and realize like, oh, it's not getting me to where I want to be. So I think it just depends. But I would be careful. Like I would be curious as to what they're putting in the tinctures and be a partner in that. Hi, my skin has become super dry and even itchy after my first baby. What can I do? I have noticed that anything with coconut oil makes it worse. Is it normal? I would definitely get it looked into. There are some factors like hormonal factors that can drive dry skin in some cases, could possibly be like hypothyroidism, mineral deficiencies. A great book to check out would be Deep Nutrition by Catherine Shanahan. We lose about 10% of our minerals when we have a baby, and so we do need to replenish those as well. So those are some hormonal factors and nutrient factors that can sometimes drive dry skin, but it's always a good idea to get it checked out if you're worried about it. At what point would you recommend considering a Dutch test? That question's hard because it's like, I like to know where my hormones are at instead of guessing. I think I've learned the value in that because I did do the guessing thing for a long time. And obviously my training has allowed me to realize how important testing is. But I think I see a lot of people who just have they go to a doctor, they get literally a bunch of testing done, which I think sometimes they'll get they'll feel almost like just pushed into doing all this testing. Then they like come away with all this testing and then they're just thrown a lot of supplements. And then they're like, oh my gosh, testing is so expensive. It doesn't work. Like, I don't never want to do that again. And it's kind of like one of those things where I personally like to collect data on myself every so often so that I can see how things are going. So does a Dutch test tell you valuable information? Of course it does. But does it tell you a lot of information that you can apply? I don't know. What information are you already applying? Sometimes we just need to, and testing is a snapshot in time, I should say. And so sometimes it can be hard to get a overarching picture from tests, because sometimes we can look at a test and be like, oh my gosh, this is so bad, we're so imbalanced, but we have no idea what happened 9 months before. We could have been in a worse place, but we have no idea. And so it's just important to kind of recognize the fact is like testing is a snapshot in time. It doesn't tell us like where we're coming from or where we're going. And so it's important to just look at it in context. But if we don't know where our hormones are at all, it can be very helpful for sure. I mean, I think like if you don't know where your hormones are at all, it can be a great insight and a great tool to kind of just be like, okay, this is where I'm at. And like, I'm working on getting to this place. Asked that question about truly low estrogen because I recently read that light periods can mean low E. I have very light periods and past history of HA. Also no major symptoms typically associated with estrogen dominance. Then that's like a totally a place where we want to explore low estrogen. Absolutely. Because, you know, that is a factor. If we have had a past of hypothalamic amenorrhea or we're menopausal, those are places where we can truly have low estrogen, and we do need to take that into account. Is palm oil a PUFA? No. It does have some PUFAs in it, but it's fairly low PUFA. What's a good ingredient list for sourdough bread, like for the flour? Whatever you want. Like, just you want to make sure that's where you have to do your own research. How are the people you're buying from the sourdough from making the sourdough? What ingredients are they using? Sourdough should really just be flour, water, sour starter, and salt. You know, it shouldn't have yeast in it. It shouldn't have a bunch of added ingredients. It should just be regular flour that's not fortified. Water, starter, salt. The relaxed sauna is very low EMF and far infrared. Thanks, Amanda. That's good to know. I've heard that the higher dose sauna blanket is lower in EMFs. Oh, interesting. Would love to know your thoughts on slow juicing veggies and fruits. Super high in enzymes and minerals. Just be careful with where you're getting your vegetables and your fruits, but vegetables specifically, because remember that fruits, I get this question a lot. Like, fruits are the fruit of the tree, meaning that the water has to go up the trunk of the tree into the branches and into the leaves, and the tree preserves its best for the fruit. Whereas leaves and vegetables that are growing from the ground are pulling things directly from the ground. And there's not as much of a filter, like you're getting whatever's in the ground into those leaves. And so it's just important to be really careful with our vegetables. Realistic time frame for healing to reach all the signs of a healthy metabolism checklist. That's going to be very wide range depending on your history. I don't even want to give a range because I think if people are coming into a place like super trashed, it can mean a long time. It really just depends on the history. It could be years. It could be 1 year. It could be like 5 years. Of course, finding some big wins along the way, but a lot of times it can take time. What do you think about, and remember, it's literally a consistent journey. It's never going to end. Like, it's never going to be like, oh, I've made it. Like, no one really makes it. So I think that's important to remember. Like, oh, I'm fine now. Everything's great. Life's amazing. I'm completely balanced. Like, no stress. I mean, if that's you, I'm envious. But honestly, life's a journey, and there's always going to be, it's always going to be trying to find some balance in kind of these ups and downs. What do you think about cleaning the face with olive oil or coconut oil? Yeah, I love oil cleansing. I do it pretty regularly. I hope you are doing well. Just got my Mirena IUD removed because of obvious hormonal imbalance. Is there an approximate time frame I should wait to test my hormones? Personally, I would be looking if I'm ovulating, and I would wait until I ovulate, or hormones are going to probably be pretty low across the board. But if you ovulated on the IUD, then that's going to be the difference. So I personally would just wait till I ovulate so that I get an accurate picture of where my hormones are at after I ovulate. I'm hypothyroid on thyroxine and been eating pro-metabolic for about 6 months, but I find lately I'm so tired I struggle to even stand some days. Is this normal? Thanks so much for your advice. It's not normal, especially if that's something that's changed. Yeah, you definitely should get your if you feel like your thyroid is the culprit, you should definitely get it tested if you haven't already, to see if like something has shifted or changed. Should have reworded my question about importance of taking waking pulse. I meant how significant is a low waking pulse if it then rises with food? Is low waking pulse as much of a sign of low metabolism as temp? I can just, well, I don't know how low you're talking. If you're talking like 60s, 50, like, I don't know how low you're talking. If it's super low, then that could be a sign of like a little bit of just a slow metabolism or suppression from stress hormones. But it's the significance of it is not really that significant except for knowing that knowledge, because as long as it's raising after food, we just got to keep doing what we're doing. You know what I mean? There's nothing we could do about the low waking pulse, unless we're finding that certain habits are maybe contributing or not contributing. But yeah, it just, it's significant in the sense of like, you're getting that data, like, well, like, I think that my pulses are slightly low and they could probably be improving over time, but that's going to take time, and it's not something to obsess about, like trying to raise. How do you consume eggshell calcium? I understand how to make it, but struggle taking it because it does change the texture of foods a bit, even with grinding as fine as I can. Personally, I throw it into a smoothie, or I literally just mix it in water and drink it because I just don't want to deal with the texture. Same thing goes for pearl powder. Like, I don't like the texture. I think it tastes disgusting. So I just like have it in some juice on the side of a meal and just like take a quick shot of it. I'm 20 years old and I've likely had hypothyroid my whole life. My naturopath says that medication is the only real way to deal with it since it's done so much damage. Is it possible to fix naturally? Instead of saying like if it is or is it not, or it's not, I think it's important to look at like, why are we hypothyroid? Are we hypothyroid from a medication deficiency? No. And a lot of times there's a lot of factors driving it. A lot of times there's vitamin A involved, iodine possibly involved, potassium, magnesium, sodium. There's a lot of nutrients involved. And there's no shame in medication. I think that's important. But also to just act, I've seen a lot of people take medication and feel worse as well, just because they're not dealing with the root cause of their issue. Now, some people feel great on medication. I think it just depends on the person. But I think it's important to understand that no matter if we take the medication or not, we still need to deal with the root cause issues that are driving those issues in the first place. Are there any minerals one may be deficient in that can help aid sleep? Yeah, all minerals, but magnesium specifically. I sometimes when I have a hard time sleeping, so I'll just share with you guys what I do for like a sleep, for sleep, because sometimes like the days leading up to my ovulation, I get a little bit restless almost. If I'm not doing a good job taking care of myself during that time, I'm very sensitive to stress. Like those 3 days in my follicular phase, it's like 3 days right before I ovulate. And so what I do is I take 200 milligrams of magnesium glycinate. I think I take 200 milligrams of L-theanine. I think it's around that. It's 2 capsules. I can't remember each capsule is 200 or 100. And then I do inositol, 1,000 milligrams, or I think it's 1,000 milligrams of inositol, and a little bit of glycine before bed. And I usually will have that with a bowl of ice cream. That is like, it knocks me out cold. I don't know if I sleep if I sleep any heavier when I don't take that. Like that is probably it's like a recipe that works so well for me. L-theanine, it works better for me than any adaptogen, magnesium glycinate, and then the inositol mixed with the ice cream and the glycine. It just, for whatever reason, that combo really works for me. What can I do to protect my gut from the antibiotics I'm taking for 7 days? Tooth extraction. I think we should just really focus on all the other factors, making sure we're getting like the nutrient dense foods in. And remember, what we do after antibiotics is actually the most important thing because antibiotics create space. And so once space is created, we get to determine what grows back based on our diet. And a lot of times, the problem with antibiotics is they are wiping out bacteria but don't wipe out fungus, and that fungus loves space. They love to come back fast. So it's important to make sure that after antibiotics we're eating the right things to make sure our gut microbiome comes back better than before, or almost as good as before. Maybe TMI, but I feel like I don't poop enough compared to how much I eat. Could coffee enemas help? I think like coffee enemas can be a helpful tool, but they're not going to fix how much we're pooping. We want to make sure that our transit time is good. So figuring out is our transit time like a good 24 hours, or is it taking a couple days for food to move through our digestive tract? That's really important. And then we need to figure out like how much fiber do we need? Some of us just need a little bit more fiber. Like I really do well adding a lot of roots in, like parsnips and beets and carrots. Like I do a large carrot salad. I split it in half and eat some like with my mid-morning snack and some with my mid-afternoon snack, but it's very large. And I sometimes like if things get slow, we do need to work on getting them sped up. Coffee enemas only are working at the end of the bowel. They're not actually like speeding up transit time. Are there any negative things to watch out for when supplementing with lysine, taurine, or zinc carnosine? Lysine and taurine. I like both of those. I'm particularly careful with lysine, but taurine tends to be a good supplement from my experience. But zinc is not. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of supplemental. But everyone's a little bit different in what they decide. But a lot of times it can deplete copper, which ends up being problematic later on in life. What type of oil is okay to use in the air fryer? I heard you aren't supposed to use ghee in it, and that's what I typically cook with. I use whatever I want. I'm a rule breaker. So that's just how it goes. Because I'm not going to like use, most people are using like olive oil or canola oil or stuff like that, and I refuse to cook with that. I've been cooking lately with like a little bit of MCT oil in the air fryer, but I'm wondering, like somebody just mentioned like you're not supposed to heat it up, and I'm like I need to look into that a little bit more. Best ways to lower high cortisol, adrenaline, already working to balance blood sugar, lower EMFs, etc. Sometimes it could just be time, but a lot of people like potassium and sodium can be big contributors. Whole foods, vitamin C, magnesium, very important. Those are all like very helpful at calming the adrenals down. I'm trying to think of what else. Like some people do really well with L-theanine. And some people just need like a bedtime snack, or need to kind of play around with their carbohydrates. Like some people are just not eating enough carbs, surprisingly, which, a lot of people are like, oh, like I think I'm eating enough carbs. But then when they actually like get their carbs up, they're like, oh, I'm doing much better. What would you recommend for hemorrhoids? I wouldn't recommend anything, but a lot of times, at least in the functional medicine space, they often tie like hemorrhoids to gut issues or liver issues. So supporting like the liver and gut. I find that like when I had them in the past, like homeopathic remedies really worked very well for me, like homeopathic suppositories. But yeah, I think it's more of like there's other issues going on. Oh, glycine. Yeah, it's important when you supplement glycine to just be careful because you don't want to do too much because it can deplete your B6. So, just like with all nutrients, when you take something isolated, there's always a bigger risk for possibly causing other imbalances. So it's just kind of important to not go overboard and to use what we need. More is not better. I met a girl. Some people leave some weird comments in my lives. Are there any other tests you recommend to know where your body's at besides the Dutch and the HTMA? I like the Full Monty Iron panel to kind of see where iron is. I really like an organic acids test if you are struggling with like any type of gut issues, just because most stool tests don't test for a variety of fungus, and it's really hard to assess if we have small intestinal fungal overgrowths. Whereas an organic acids test, I specifically like the Great Plains Laboratory one, can really help you assess like your overall fungal load. So that can be helpful, and obviously bacteria as well. I'm trying to think of what else, like Full Monty, like, you know, insulin, HbA1c, like glucose. Those are helpful tools as well. But I just like all the data, and then like kind of taking and applying it to the person is important. But yeah, Dutch, hair tissue mineral analysis, GI map. A lot of people really like them. I like them, but I think it can leave a lot of holes. So I'm just careful. Like some people are like, take a GI map and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like the end all be all. And I'm like, there's like a lot of holes that the GI map can leave. How to introduce oregano for the first time, how many milligrams dose with food. I can't really tell you like how much to do, how to do it for the first time. I would just follow the directions. How do you prepare bone broth? Mine is never really tasting good. I do a lot of vegetables. I like save all my vegetable scraps, like potato peels and all that kind of stuff in the freezer. And then I just like throw it in at the end of the week, just onion skins, like all that kind of stuff. It's rich in minerals. And then I always put a splash of apple cider vinegar in there, and then just throw in the bones. And I like different bones have different tastes. So like knuckle bones tend to be good. And then remember, you want to bring it up to a boil at first, or like a really good simmer, and like skim all the crap off the top. So you're just kind of taking all the impurities off the top, and then, you know, maybe bring it up to a simmer one more time, take all the crap off the top, like just trying to make sure you're like scraping all the impurities until you get like a rich, milky broth. I really like watching, it's a YouTube channel called Delish, and there's a specific girl on there, June, who cooks. I just like enjoy watching her cook, even though she like cooks a lot of like PUFAs and stuff. She has some really good tips, and she's like very good at not wasting anything in the kitchen. So I've been really enjoying like watching her make broths, because she makes all types of broths, from like fish bones to like beef bones, pork bones. Like she just uses all of her stuff. Like there's never any waste in her kitchen. If you had SIBO, what would be your first steps? I've been eating fairly pro-metabolic for 3 months and have seen great success, but still struggling with some bloat. I would make sure that I'm having regular bowel movements first. So that's the first thing I would be hyper-focused with, is getting my transit time up and making sure my bowel movements are super regular, super satisfying. If not, I'd play around with the amount of raw carrot salad, trying more, trying less, seeing if like beets help me, apples, just really working on things that are going to really help mobilize and get things moving, and really working on transit time. Sometimes that's enough to really get like bacterial load down just over time. If it wasn't, then I'd probably try maybe like some like gentle antibacterials and see if that helps with the bloat. Sometimes it takes some consistency, but I would add that in after transit time was good, and just kind of see. I really personally like a biotics research. Ever since I read the article that was comparing like the biotics research, FC-cidal and dysbiocide, with like typical antibiotics prescribed for SIBO, and the research study showed that they were just as effective. I found that those were probably like one of the most powerful supplements for bacterial overgrowth. There are a lot of others on the market. I think it's just really important to get transit time on that first. Any additional tips for hair regrowth? I use red light and caffeine so far. Really making sure that you're obviously getting all the nutrients you need, sleep, sun. I think that some like a hair oil could be helpful. Like I've seen a lot of success with the like a, what's it called? Black seed oil. It's like black cumin seed oil. Doing a few drops of that just mixed with either, I've been doing like tallow or shea butter, but I've been interested in actually taking like more of an oil and infusing it with like some herbs like peppermint and rosemary, stuff that like stimulates circulation. But a lot of the like homemade ones on Etsy are made with like sunflower oil or safflower oil. So I need to really look out for a formulation that has like jojoba oil or some things that are a little bit more either monounsaturated or saturated. But sometimes it just takes time. Like we just have to give it some time. But yeah, I would be focusing on circulation, like getting blood flow to the scalp, and temperature matters because the temperature, our body temperature, is going to affect like our scalp temperature. Any specific brands of L-theanine or inositol that you like? L-theanine, I think I've been using Nutricost, which is just a cheap brand that tends to work pretty well for me. And then inositol, I've been actually using the Ovasitol, but I know a lot of people like the pure encapsulations inositol. Thoughts on dry yeast from the store used for bread? I think it just depends. Like some people do fine with them and some people do not do good with yeast. What does it mean when your body temperature decreases throughout the day instead of increasing? It can mean a lot of things. Just metabolism slow. We're not eating enough throughout the day to fuel our metabolism. Sometimes it's not enough protein. Sometimes it's not enough carbs. Sometimes it's just stress. So we kind of have to assess like why our metabolism is slowing down throughout the day instead of increasing. Are hiccups a sign of low stomach acid? How can you improve it? That's interesting because I always wonder why hiccups happen. I can never find like information on it. It's always just like, oh, hiccups are normal. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I want to know why. It makes me wonder if there's maybe like some structural reasons why it's happening, like need for trigger point therapy, possibly low stomach acid. I mean, I don't know. A lot of times hiccups happen for me like in between meals. So I'm just like trying to figure out like what they could be. It almost is like a reflux, but I'm like, what is it? Maybe it is reflux. I don't know. What are your favorite sources of potassium? I do a lot of fruit, and so that's where I get a majority of my potassium. I do potatoes, sweet potatoes, milk, coconut water. Coconut water is a very concentrated source. And then like supplemental wise, I do like Jigsaw's Adrenal cocktail. Bumble root hydration powder has a lot of potassium in it. Cream of tartar also does. Like some people make their adrenal cocktails using cream of tartar. So those are all some like more concentrated sources that we need to be a little bit more careful with. But yeah, coconut water tends to be like and orange juice tend to be like my main source. Let's see. Do you recommend any nutrition profile tests? I've heard of the Genova Ion profile. I've gotten in the past. I don't really like see the point. A lot of times people will run it and then just supplement like based on it. And I'm like, well, we kind of need to work on our like nutrients from whole foods, but I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if it's like 100% necessary. I think like we can just do blood tests and be just fine. Except for like when it comes to minerals, there are certain things we need to look at other aspects like the hair and stuff like that. I heard that the longer you cook bone broth, the higher in histamine. Should that be a concern? Yeah, if you have histamine issues, you probably shouldn't cook your bone broth a long time, or you might actually not do good with bone broth and you may need like to use like a stock or something instead. Just like a regular chicken broth or a regular chicken stock. How do we get on the wait list to become one of your clients? I am not taking new clients right now, and I am not taking a wait list either. I kind of announced this like a couple weeks back. I'm just honestly taking a break right now. I've been in a place where like the past year just has burned me out and I can only do so much. And so I've taken a little bit of a step back from one-on-one, and I'm actually getting another certification that's going to allow me to help people more so I can come back stronger towards the end of the year. I will be announcing that. So if you continue to follow me and continue to, periodically check in, I will make sure that you guys know when I'm taking clients, and it's going to be a little bit of a different structure so that I can serve more people and serve them better. You like to eat raw apples or do you prefer to eat them cooked? Why? I like to cook them down because their pectin is easier to digest or possibly easier to digest when they're cooked. But sometimes people do well with like a raw shredded apples. Do you know of any good brands of bras? I'm trying to manage the larger chest I have from FN, LOL. I am not a bra expert. I have pretty large breasts, and I do not really love bras. I rarely wear them. And if I do, they're like very flimsy. I don't like restricting my boobs at all. I don't like suppressing lymphatic drainage. Call me a weirdo. But yeah, I like really let my boobs hang free for the most part. So I'm not the person to ask for bras. I have been looking at like a few different brands, but honestly, like I'm not an expert. I was thinking of even like asking on Instagram stories, like bra recommendations. And then if I do, I'll share with you guys because I know a lot of people are like, do you have any bra recs? And I'm like, honestly, bras are not my strong suit. Any tips on dealing with ingrown hairs? I guess like from what I've heard, like conventional advice from like estheticians and stuff is to like exfoliate and moisturize. I personally like don't shave at least like my bikini line and stuff a lot, or I just always get ingrown hairs. So I will go get waxed, or some people do laser hair removal. I personally have no experience with that, but I find that if I shave too often, I definitely always get ingrown hairs. And my waxer like / esthetician said, you know, don't wear underwear to bed because that will like chafe and cause ingrown hairs. So I've done that and that seems to help. But honestly, if you figure it out, let me know. Hi, Jess. I increased my calories. I'm eating all the right carbs, but still binge from time to time. When adding more protein helps, sometimes I have a meal and an hour later I'm super hungry. I would try a few different things, but sometimes like we can be really hard on ourselves about binging, and it's important to know like sometimes it can take time. I know for me personally, like as I increased my calories and worked on my macronutrient balance, I did binge less and less, but I didn't like, for me, it wasn't like I went from binging all the time to just stopping and like, well, I'm better. Like there were still times that I was binging, and I wish I, like in hindsight, I wish I wouldn't have like beat myself up about it. And I wish I wouldn't have like constantly stressed about like, what am I doing wrong? I think sometimes my body just literally needed it. And it was like a psychological response to like just being in a starvation mode for so long. So that's my personal experience. I'm not telling you like what you should or shouldn't do, but I would, you know, it's a good idea to experiment around and see what works for our body, but also just give our body space to balance out. What kind of certifications, education do you recommend to get in the field you are in? I think it's just important to kind of like pick a career path and just do it. If I know that like nutritional therapy practitioners, like they're pretty animal based training. I don't necessarily recommend like all the certifications I got. I did the best that I could at the time, but a lot of people ask me like, what school do I go to learn what you learned? And I'm like, you don't. Like, you need to learn the basics in like anatomy and physiology, and then you need to study. Like I've spent thousands of hours studying, researching, reading books, taking continuing education classes. Like it's been a lot, and connecting the dots. So I think it's important to understand like no schooling is going to be perfect in the sense it's going to teach you everything you need to know. And when we think that about us, like a certification or a schooling, we're actually going to limit ourselves. So I think like what I did was a great basis and allowed me to get into the career that I got into, but by no means was it the end all be all. When I started, like I know a lot of you guys think I'm like, oh, like, how do I do what you do? But I started as a personal trainer. I really wanted to train athletes, and I really wanted to work as a nutritionist for athletes. And so I went into nutrition with that kind of aspect in mind. And then over time, I started to realize like women, the whole calories in, calories out theory was not working for women. And I also started to notice other things like they were losing their periods and stuff like that. And their hormones were just like crazy. And I was very interested in that, like learning that aspect. I kept asking the question, why? I've always been like a curious cat because I was experiencing hormonal issues myself. And so I was like, I'm realizing that these aren't as like unique as I thought. Like it seems like everyone I'm working with are dealing with the similar hormonal issues. And so I started to just dig and 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 dig. And most of what I've learned, I did not learn in school. I've kind of just collected information over the years. The certification that I really loved was like functional diagnostic nutrition. That was a great certification. I'm taking the root cause protocol right now, which is awesome. But if I was to go back and like get retrained as like a nutritionist, I would have probably become a nutritional therapy practitioner. But yeah, that's sorry, not to take too long on that. But yeah, I think we just have to kind of pick some stuff or, pick something that allows us to start helping people and just start studying and researching in our free time as well. Anything to look out for when implementing cream of tartar? Some people just get the raging D, so it's just important to go slow. And like if you're like some people when they implement potassium start to get like heart palpitations and stuff. So it's important to like not go too hardcore with potassium because we need to keep it in balance with sodium and magnesium. So just being careful with it is really what matters. But as long as we're like doing small amounts, it's usually okay. Some people just get really bad digestive distress to the point where they can't handle it. When I wake up, my eyes are tired, heavy, achy, irritated, and they stay like that all morning to sometimes afternoon. And then evening, they're back to normal. This has been happening for the last 2 to 3 months or so. Some days are better, but I have no clue what it could be. Any thoughts? Sometimes they are so heavy and achy that they are hard to keep open, and sunlight irritates them more. Do you have allergies? Like, is there histamine issues involved? Like, I'm just curious as like what's going on during the night. Is the heat on? Like, that can be a huge factor. Are you letting fresh air into your room at some point? A lot of people don't realize like how dirty indoor air is. And when it comes to be wintertime, a lot of people just keep their windows closed and like run the heater all winter long. And I'm like, why? So like we got to make sure we're airing out, even if it's cold where we live. Like we got to air out our room. We got to make sure we're getting fresh air and just be like, I'm really careful with the heater because it can really, really irritate. Like my eyes just water, like just streams of water. Because it dries out the air and that can be really problematic for some people. Not saying that's what it is, but I'm just offering maybe an idea to maybe experiment with or check out. And then let's see, last question. Is there a brand of Greek yogurt that you like that is not too tart? I mean, it's like a personal preference. You guys ask me like sometimes really funny questions and I'm like, well, it's just if you guys have like a very particular preference or you're very picky, then you need to figure out what you like. Like I'm going to recommend something and your little picky butt is going to be like, "Oh, I don't like that one." And so you guys like if you guys are picky, it's on you to figure out what you like. But and that's said in love. But I should say that to like cut the tartness of Greek yogurt will add honey or maple syrup or fruits when it comes to red light. Can you guys still hear me? If you can hear me, just send me a thumbs up or something like some kind of emoji. Can you guys still hear me? Can somebody just send me an emoji if you guys can hear me? Just like one emoji, whatever one it is. I just want to make sure you guys can still hear me. Okay. I'll just finish this and then I'll just end it. Oh, very choppy. Okay, perfect. Some of you guys can hear me, some of you guys can't. Okay, thank you. I'm just like, it said my internet connection's unstable, so I'll finish this before, before but yeah, I truly think that the red heat lamp can really initiate a detox. And it actually makes me wonder if like heating up our tissues is actually allowing polyunsaturated fats to move, or, you know, other things like, you know, just like when we get in a sauna or we heat up our body in a bath, like there is detoxification. So I think that there is like an aspect of detoxification to increasing body heat using the red heat lamp. And that's why like we do need to be careful about overusing it. But yeah, I have definitely seen myself get some serious detox reactions after using it. Now it's a lot less, but at first I definitely did. And if I was, and you're pregnant, I would just be careful to not get too close to it, like and not overuse it. Like I think that's important as well. Like I think the amount of time we do it and also like how close we are probably is going to affect it as well. All right, you guys, last call for questions. Like if you have anything on your mind, I'll give you guys a few minutes to ask or talk. But I'm excited. I'm really starting to get excited for the podcast. So hang in there because there's going to be a podcast by the end of the year. So density, should our poop not be uber smelly? Yeah, those are all important factors. Like I think our poop should not be like so smelly where it's like, oh my gosh. And definitely like it should feel full and satisfying. I think that's the most important thing. And we shouldn't have a ton of undigested food in our stool. And we should also be aware of transit time. I do think that's important. Like if we're pooping out what we ate 3 days ago, there's a problem. Because even if we're pooping a couple times a day, but it's taking 3 days to get through our digestive tract, that's going to be like a problem. So transit time is, I think, very important. But yeah, there's a lot of people that go by the Bristol stool chart. And then there's some people that will argue and say that that's too dense and we actually need to have a little bit of softer stool. So there's a lot of debate on that topic, but I think it's more about it being full, satisfying, making sure we're eliminating all the waste from our bowels and it's not moving through our digestive system super slow. Because some people will say that if it's sat there for too long, it won't actually smell because we've reabsorbed all the toxins. So I think that there are caveats to each factor. And instead of looking for like rule-based, we need to kind of look at overall quality and assess it using that instead. Can you explain yoni steaming and yoni eggs? Any suggestion on reliable brands? You know, I'm not big into that. I am super interested in the topic. I just haven't that's not something that I've dove into yet. But from what I understand, yoni eggs are meant to strengthen the pelvic floor. But I think that there are some factors that women need to be aware of. Like some women actually have their pelvic floors are too tight in some areas and too loose in other areas. And I've heard of women using yoni eggs improperly and actually getting certain pelvic floor muscles too tight. So that's important to be aware of. And then the steaming, I think it has to do with almost some almost nourishment with herbs. But yeah, that's definitely not my strong area. I am curious about it though. Maybe I'll dive into it at some point and do a YouTube video about it. I'm pregnant, eating pro-metabolic, but my hands atopic dermatitis has been really hard to deal with. What would you recommend for relief and improvement? It's kind of hard with skin issues to kind of figure it out because it can take some time and there are a lot of factors involved. It can be gut. A lot of times the liver can be burdened by hormones, and so that can be a factor. For me, when I had skin issues, some stuff that really helped were just balms made with tallow, just stuff that was really soothing and moisturizing. But I think that's very personal, you know. And I think I would just try to find stuff that was a little bit soothing. There's some that use bee products like propolis and stuff. And I'm curious, I've heard a lot of good things about that. But I think everyone's a little bit different in what works for them. So, all in all, I'd be trying to maybe figure out if when it flares, does it flare at certain points? Are there certain things that make it get worse or better? Whether that's what I eat or if I'm sleeping or things I'm exposing my skin to. Like, I'd just be kind of paying attention to what's making it worse and what's making it better, certain foods. But sometimes it like can be helpful to just get some relief in between. And I would probably be doing like something that's going to help. A lot of times like skin issues are fungal a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times they are fungal related. If we have like other signs of fungus, it can often like point to that. But sometimes it's just like we got to support our liver, raw carrot salad and stuff like that. All right, you guys, last call. Any more questions for me? And then I will end this and let you guys go to bed. And we'll, of course, collectively meet again on next Wednesday. Oh, I should show you. Do you like my shirt? It's Keanu. I love him. I'm a fangirl. All right, you guys. Well, I hope you have a good night, and I'll see you next Wednesday.